Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kersner.
Hello and welcome to episode 75 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now, and I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this wonderful, precious, lovely present moment. The title and topic of this podcast is, Are you responding or reacting in the present moment? And I certainly wanted to take time to talk about reactions and responses and how we could be more observant about the consequences of both, or the value of each, in the present moment. Now, societal programming, what I also reference as the matrix, teaches us and leads us to be in more of a state of reaction. And there are people that do and have awakened and figured out better ways to respond. But more often than not, people tend to react when they enter into situations that have any level of stress, any emotion. There's an immediate reaction. And I'm not here to pass judgment, because I personally have reacted many times. And as I reflect back objectively, without judgment, I can see how the reaction that I chose had a consequence. And it's not to say that responding doesn't have a consequence either, but reaction is very quick. And more often than not, the ego is right there feeding us, fueling us, strumming the chords of different emotions and thoughts very quickly, so that we react and say things and do things that we oftentimes regret. That's not helpful at all. But the ego thrives when we do these things, when we create collateral damage, when things come out of our mouths that can't be taken back. The ego loves it, because then it keeps us in a loop of suffering, self-inflicted suffering. So reactions usually lead to more self-inflicted suffering that is and only serves the purpose of the ego. Now, there are times where we don't have sufficient amount of peace and presence to not react, or at least that's the way it seems. But if we actually zoom out enough, we can see that if we use our tools and we start our days more peacefully, that when we enter into stressful situations, we don't necessarily need to react right away. Or at least we can see our desire to react and not react, to keep quiet for a second, to be present, to pause. And it's really the pause that allows us to see how a reaction is only going to garner collateral damage. It's only going to garner negative results. So if we can pause with presence, then we have a moment to really see things for what they are. We can strategize, and then we can respond. Now, if you think about the way the word react sounds and comes out, the energy behind it, and then you think about the word respond, and that's actually important to think about, the energy behind the two words of react and respond. They feel completely different, and they are completely different, and they create completely different results. And it's not to say that reacting is always going to lead to a negative consequence, but more often than not, when we react, we just don't spend the time to navigate the moment properly, because we're being led by our emotions, and ultimately we're being led by our ego. If we pause, use our presence tools, take some time to think about how we want to interact, then we can respond. And a response is a beautiful thing when there's enough time given, or at least enough presence employed, so that we can see the situation, for the people, places, and things in front of us for what they are. And then we can move forward. So the question for you and the question for me as I reflect back, or I start over taking a look at all the things that are ahead of me or that I'm interacting with, am I in a state of reaction? Am I reacting to this person? Am I reacting to the stimulus? And if I am reacting, well, why am I reacting? What is this reaction about? What is it triggering? Because once I get triggered, then the emotions start to shoot up, then the ego is there, and then things happen which are usually not positive, and they're not even neutral. And for me, as I navigate this reality, the third dimension, I see a lot of reaction taking place all over. And I understand why. I mean, if you don't do your ego work, your ego's always going to be right there pushing you to react. And oftentimes we will react and things will not work out the way we want or the way that we had intended. So this topic is valuable for everyone because we all have a lot on our plates. We all have a lot of decisions to make. We all have responsibilities. And this reality, the third dimension, the matrix, is usually a rather stressful existence to endure. And that stress puts pressure on our nervous system, and which leads a lot of people to maintain a state of fight or flight, which is your sympathetic nervous system. And when you're in a state of fight or flight, you're going to react, because that's just the way that you're existing. Being present allows you to calm your nervous system down using presence tools, creating that presence practice, that mindfulness practice, using binaural beats, guided meditations to help engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relax. And that allows for more presence and also for a response. Oftentimes when we react, we don't have to react and give that reaction so quickly. We can pause, we can say, we don't know and we'll get back to you. We can walk away and calm ourselves and then re-engage. But the reflection point for us at this moment is, are we in a state of reactivity? Are we reacting? Are we overly stimulated? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? What's our ego telling us? What stories is our ego feeding us? And how can we work our way back to the present moment so that we can have clarity? Once we have clarity, then we can respond. That's where the response is. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is an easy transition to make, because it's not, because I know how I was raised. I know the belief system that was given to me. I know the state of being that most of us exist in. And it leads to reactions. So it's important that you're not judgmental on yourself or others as you react or they react, because egos love reactions. One ego reacts to another ego, and back and forth and back and forth. It takes a person to really dedicate themselves to mindfulness and presence to be able to see what these reactions are, and so that you can work on slowing the reactions down and possibly ending your need to react and working your way towards a state of presence so that you can respond. I hope that this topic is helpful, or at least gives you pause so that you can see the way that you've been interacting and make some modifications, some recalibrations on your interactions without being judgmental. I can't stress that enough. Do not really resist the urge to judge yourself or others on the way that they're reacting, on the way that you're reacting. Just see that there's an opportunity to not react, to pause, to use your presence tools, to observe without judgment, and then respond. So I'm going to end the podcast on that note. I hope that you found this topic helpful. I want to thank you all for sharing these present seconds with me, and I wish you all peace.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.